The full name of our heroine is Miriam Elizabeth Rodriguez Martinez. From now on, we will use only the first of her names. Miriam was born on February 5, 1960, in the troubled region of San Fernando, Tamaulipas, Mexico. It is here, according to official statistics, that people most frequently go missing. To help you understand the full scale of the problem, since 1964. From 1964 to 2019, 10,032 people went missing in the state of Tamaulipas. This is a very high figure for Mexico. However, let's return to Miriam. As has already become clear, Miriam wasn't very lucky with her place of birth, but what can you do? You have to adapt. And Miriam managed to do that quite well. She received a basic education and built a family. Our heroine had an only daughter, Karen. Miriam's life was going its usual way until it happened. The unfortunate year of 2012. The end of the familiar life. Earlier, I already mentioned that Tamaulipas is an extremely criminal region of Mexico, where people often disappear. However, I didn't specify why this is the case. Those familiar with the crime situation in Mexico can probably guess. It's about the cartels. Yes, it's them. Militants from numerous groups kidnap people, contact their relatives, and demand ransom. A fairly standard scheme for making easy money for the bandits. Unfortunately, this straightforward activity directly affected Miriam's family. One day in 2012, Karen was driving her pickup on the highway. Suddenly, two trucks blocked her path. It was obvious that something bad was about to happen. Karen had no way to either go around these trucks or break through them. By ramming. Later, witnesses recounted that several people approached the girl's pickup. They quickly pulled Karen out of the car, loaded her into their vehicle, and drove off in an unknown direction. Soon, the criminals contacted Miriam and demanded a ransom for her own daughter. Miriam, naturally, had no choice and complied with their demands. She brought the money to the bandits, but never got her daughter back. Miriam found out that the cartel involved in her daughter's kidnapping was the one with the resonant name Los Zetas. I'll say a few words about it. The theory of Mexican crime. Los Zetas is one of the many criminal groups in Mexico. It was founded in 1997 by Golfo Helen and Mexican Army Lieutenant Arturo de Sena. Notably, a significant portion of most Mexican cartels consists of former officials, police officers, military personnel, and other law enforcement agents. The reason for this is rather weak state institutions. The Mexican government simply cannot provide its employees with decent working conditions. Therefore, those who know how to handle weapons well and don't ask unnecessary questions are welcomed with open arms in the criminal sphere. Such people are useful there, as being in a cartel, you could die at any moment. However, there will definitely be no problems with money, and this factor plays a decisive role. The operations of Los Zetas became noticeable in 1998. Year. The group quickly reached an international level in the drug trade. Drugs are still the most profitable business for the cartels. But that doesn't mean Mexican bandits just sit around on plantations. Cartels kidnap people, run brothels, and are involved in a host of other illegal activities. What about the hierarchy? The hierarchy in Los Zetas. As expected from a structure created by former military personnel, the cartel's hierarchy is characterized by strict discipline and a complex system of subordination. However, its exact structure remains a mystery. It is known that the cartel consists of many autonomous groups that are not directly connected to each other. This means that eliminating one link does not affect the functionality of the entire organization. Perhaps this is precisely what ensures the resilience of cartels throughout Mexico. What levels of hierarchy are known to us today? The first level is the Falcons. These are the youngest members of the cartel, armed supporters from among the local citizens. Their task is to monitor the territory and relay information about suspicious movements. The second level is the Cobras. These people lead the Falcons and are responsible for specific areas. They are also armed with firearms and oversee the execution of orders. The third level is the New Cetos. This includes former military personnel, mainly from Guatemala, who have undergone special training. They are equipped with AK rifles, HKG-3, M16. They use grenades, body armor, helmets, night vision devices, and radio communication equipment. Some of them are deserters from elite army units. The fourth level is the Old Cobras. These are the commanders of the Cobras, although they generally do not have military training. A rather interesting feature of the structure, if you keep in mind that in cartels, the principle of might makes right usually applies. The fifth level is the Old Cetus. This is the Elizabeth of the cartel. Former Special Forces soldiers who defected to the Cetus back in the late 90s. Their number is small, only about 40 people, but they were the ones who laid the foundation of this brutal criminal organization. While you digest the structure of Los Zetas, I return to Miriam. After all, she is the main character of this story. For the birth of the organization. The situation Miriam faced was truly terrifying. Mexican cartels are notorious for their ruthlessness, sparing no one who stands in their way. And the authorities. In most cases, they either turn a blind eye to what's happening or are themselves mired in corruption. Often, both. The poor mother, realizing that negotiating with the cartel was impossible, decided to turn to those who are supposed to protect citizens, the local officials and law enforcement agencies. However, instead of real help, she encountered indifference and greed. Officials simply extorted money from her, promising assistance, but in the end, they just shrugged, citing their own powerlessness. But Miriam was not going to give up. After the first unsuccessful attempts to find her daughter, she realized that if there was no one to rely on, then she had to fight, together with those who also feel this pain. She began to unite families who had lost their loved ones. Thus, in 2012, a public organization called Missing Child Parents was born. Parents of the Missing. In just a year of activity, 600 families joined the movement, united by the common goal of bringing back relatives kidnapped by cartels. But despite the progress made, Miriam herself continued the search for her daughter. For 2 long years, she did not give up trying to find out her fate, clinging to every lead, every opportunity. And then everything changed in an instant. One piece of news turned her life upside down forever. Where was Karen found? For 2 years, Miriam did not stop trying to find her daughter. The woman believed that Karen was still in the hands of the cartel, waiting to be freed. Or at least ransomed. Unfortunately, the release of Miriam's daughter went according to the worst-case scenario. In 2014, Mexican law enforcement found 73 bodies on one of the abandoned ranches. Among the bodies found was Karen. Soon, Miriam was informed about what had happened. The bad news had a strong impact on the poor mother. 2 years of her life were essentially lived in vain. Additionally, the woman became disillusioned with the authorities and people. Overall, all those officials who asked for money in exchange for help, which they ultimately did not provide, became the embodiment of the helplessness caused by the brutal cartels. Miriam knew who was involved in her daughter's abduction, the Los Zetas bandits. And with this knowledge, she began to prepare her personal revenge. A new meaning in life for Miriam Martinez. Turning to the authorities was pointless. Miriam's trust in the law enforcement system was shattered, and the pain of losing her daughter never left her for a second. The desire and goal of the inconsolable mother were extremely simple: to track down everyone involved in the abduction and death. Karen, and to ensure that these people could never abduct anyone again. At the same time, Miriam did not intend to do anything criminal. She did not try to poison the bandits or burn down their houses. Miriam acted wisely and took on the role of a private detective. The woman planned to gather evidence of the bandits' crimes and present it to the authorities, hoping that at least with evidence in hand, they would take action. The first step Miriam took was the basic gathering of information. It was important to understand who to target first. Information gathering usually took place on the streets, in conversations with local residents and witnesses of other crimes. After all, Miriam had her own community organization, which also helped in gathering information. However, there was no room for relaxation. The cartel's hawks never sleep. Over time, Miriam managed to gather enough information to finally start taking action. Methods of operation. Miriam clearly understood that the cartel would come for her sooner or later. It couldn't be any other way. If the cartels can't bring down the authorities, then an ordinary woman can't do it either. However, Miriam was convinced that it was worth trying. To ensure the bandits couldn't quickly figure out who was gathering information about them, Miriam often changed her appearance and used fake documents. In other words, she was a kind of actress. Miriam had innate qualities of sincerity, friendliness, and kindness. This is exactly what helped her gain the trust of the criminals' parents, who would talk about their children's personal lives. In case things got really bad, Miriam had a small pistol. However, she only used it as a last resort, mainly for intimidation. Miriam knew who she was dealing with. Among the cartel's ranks were deserters from elite army units. Against such people, her weapon was useless. Every step she took was risky. But she wasn't going to stop. Problems with lawlessness. Despite all her efforts to stay off the bandits' radar, Miriam couldn't remain unnoticed. Karen decided to put pressure on the woman and made a daring attempt to kidnap her husband. Fortunately, the man was rescued by soldiers who were nearby the scene. The attempt to kidnap another loved one prompted Miriam to directly approach the authorities. The woman requested security for her family. The request was granted, but only partially. The local authorities ordered the police to pass by Miriam's house 3 times a day. Notably, the city authorities were aware that Miriam was gathering evidence of the cartel's crimes, but they were not planning to actively assist her in this. It is evident that the officials fear for their lives, as in Mexico, their authority is actively challenged by the cartels. This trend continues to this day. Almost 400 Mexican politicians and journalists have been victims of attacks since September 2020, from the 23rd to April 2024. The issue of fighting the cartels is one of the most dangerous for local authorities. And what has Miriam managed to achieve? Miriam's work routine. One of the first people Miriam managed to track down was, oddly enough, the florist. A former gang member who decided to leave his past behind. But as soon as he saw her, he tried to run away. Miriam used her gun to intimidate him. And it worked. The criminal stopped. To hand the florist over to the authorities, Miriam had to guard him for a whole hour. This arrest became the first link in the chain. Soon, Miriam gathered evidence against several more members of the group. The youngest of them had just turned 18. But the capture of a man named Sama deserves a special mention. Miriam heard this man's name at the very beginning of her search, when she still hoped to find Karen alive. A mechanic, who was kidnapped that same night, told her about his involvement in the murder. The mechanic turned out to be lucky. The criminals let him go alive. Miriam managed to find a photo of Sama on the internet. In the photo, next to him was a girl in a store uniform, from an ice cream shop in a neighboring town, Suda from Victoria. That's where she headed. To remain unnoticed, she drastically changed her appearance. She cut her hair and dyed it bright red. For several hours a day, she watched for Sama, and when she finally saw him, she followed him all the way to his house. After finding out the criminal's address, Miriam went to the police. But there, they only sympathized with her. No one wanted to get involved in this case. The situation changed with an old-school police officer. He took on the investigation and achieved an arrest. Herself, however, they managed to catch him in another city. But this was a true victory. Sama turned out to be talkative and revealed the names of the other members of the group. Miriam's police ally, after reviewing the materials she had gathered, was amazed by the quality of the work. In all my years of service, I have never seen anything like it. The information and the amount of details that this woman gathered on her own is something inexplicable. She reached out for help to authorities at various levels, but everyone just turned away from her. It is a great honor for me to know that I helped her find the criminals who kidnapped her daughter. What are the results? Miriam knew that catching all those responsible for her daughter's death would be impossible. Some had long been serving sentences in prison, others had disappeared forever. But there were also those who decided to break with the past. One such person was a priest, whom the police arrested right during a service. During her 3 years of dangerous and persistent work, Miriam was able to find 16 people involved in the World War. In the crime, out of them, 13 criminals were sent behind bars. They were punished. Do you want to know what Miriam received as a reward? The cartel's gratitude was brutally simple. On May 10, 2017, armed bandits broke into Miriam's house and killed her. The woman received 12 gunshot wounds, from which she died. The date of the murder is noteworthy. On this day, Mother's Day was being celebrated in Mexico. I think this date was not chosen by chance. One would like to believe that such a brave person as Miriam commanded respect not only from ordinary citizens but even from the bandits. It is clear that the cartel could not leave Miriam's actions without a response. However, her death on Mother's Day can be seen as a tribute, according to the harsh logic of Mexican bandits. Miriam's mission was not limited to just capturing criminals. She initiated a chain reaction that impacted Mexico. Today, the organization she founded has grown to 13 branches across the country, and this is an astonishing result, considering that such movements simply did not exist in Mexico before. But the most striking manifestation of her influence was the protest, May 10, 2017. On this day, people took to the streets, demanding that the authorities in Mexico and the U.S. guarantee safety for human rights defenders. It was a symbol of solidarity with her struggle, a struggle that did not end even after her death.